I opened her phone by accident. A message popped up. Dinner was perfect. I missed this. It wasn't from me. That night when she walked through the door smiling, I asked one question that froze her smile in place. Did your work meeting come with candlelight and your ex holding your hand? She went pale. And that's when I decided, if she thought I was blind, she was about to learn just how cold my vision could be. Her name is Emma. We'd been married 8 years. 2 kids under 7. A faded craftsman on Maple Street with a mortgage we barely noticed. Because somehow life felt secure enough to be distracted. I fix HVAC units for a living. Long days, tighter evenings, the kind of job where your hands are perpetually smelling like metal and your head runs on lists. She teaches 2nd grade, makes lemon bars for school bake sales. We were ordinary, in that agreeable way that fools you into thinking ordinary equals permanent. That message, the one that glowed on her screen when I picked up her phone to set it down on the counter, it read like it had been written to be discovered. Dinner was perfect. I missed this no timestamp that mattered. No emoji to soften it. The phone still vibrating from one of her students' parents. The kitchen light hum. The kids' crayons scattered on the table like confetti from another small, happy war. For a second, everything blurred. The smudge of jam on my sleeve, the low radio at the other end of the counter, the way the house smelled like roasted chicken and laundry detergent. I didn't open it because I wanted to spy. I opened it because I was straightening the clutter. A habit, not a mission. But the notification was a needle that popped the balloon. My heart did that stupid animal thing people write about. A misfired ignition. When she walked in later that night, laughing about some parent-teacher mishap, I asked something ordinary. A test wrapped in normality. How was your meeting, Em? She hesitated, like a live wire cooling. That's when I asked the question that collapsed her smile. Did your meeting include candlelight? And your ex holding your hand? She went pale. Not the dramatic, scene-stealing kind of pale you see in movies, but a small, precise ashen. The kind that happens when a mask slips, and something true shows through. Her laugh coughed out into nothing. For a half-second, she looked like a woman caught in the headlights of the life she'd chosen to pretend she still had. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I washed my hands at the sink. They were still greasy from the day's work, and I liked the ritual of clean things before a decision. I told the kids to finish their homework. I told Emma to sit down. I said all the quiet, grown-up things people say when the world is collapsing, and they're trying to make it sound like a plumbing problem that can be fixed by a wrench. My name's not on your messages, I said. Who did you have dinner with? She tried the work thing twice. It was colleagues, she said, then stumbled. It was late and You said, I missed this, I interrupted. Who did you miss? She closed her eyes, and the chorus of excuses began. I listened. I cataloged. The tone, the words, the tiny ways she avoided saying a name. What was a betrayal, if not a series of small evasions built into a larger lie? When she finally admitted his name, Thomas, it landed like a door slamming shut. Thomas had been an old boyfriend, from before I moved back to town, before I traded weekend beers for steady paychecks and a house with a yard. I'd met him once at a bar when we were newly married. He'd smiled with the casual ownership of someone who still belonged to a chapter he'd already published. I should have felt jealous. I didn't. I felt the cold, precise clarity of a man who suddenly sees a problem he can fix and chooses the right tool. You should have told me, I said. Not a demand so much as a ledger entry. Her eyes filled, not with contrition, but with wary arithmetic, figuring how much to apologize, how much to buy. That night I lay awake, not imagining violent scenes or shouting matches, but a meticulous plan. Emma had misread the rules of our life. She believed deception could be a lever to move her into something better, without consequence. She was wrong. I'm not a vengeful man by nature, but I believe in justice, the way some people believe in prayer. I wanted the kind of correction that didn't make me small. I wanted consequences that were cold, obvious, inescapable, the kind that would settle permanently into the ledger of her memory. I wanted to be the author of a quiet retribution, one that left nobody unsure who had read the final page. So I started with three things: the phone notification, the name Thomas, and the smile she could no longer keep. The rest, the way the next weeks would unspool, that was the workbench I was about to build on. I didn't react immediately after she said his name. People expect drama when they catch a spouse cheating. Raised voices, slammed doors, sobbing confessions. That's what romance novels advertise. Real life rarely fits the poster. Real life is a ledger. Actions, timestamps, receipts. So I treated it like one. First thing I did was preserve the thing that had popped the balloon. Her phone. I put it in a drawer, slid a sticky note across the screen with the words, "Do not open," and walked away. Not because I was afraid of what I would find, but because I wanted to make sure I could look with a clean head and a plan. The temptation to tear the whole thing down in an instant, to yell, to threaten, to beg, would have felt satisfying in the moment, and stupid afterward. I wanted permanent satisfaction. That requires patience. While the kids brushed their teeth, I made a list. Names, times, places, possible witnesses. Emma's meeting was at a bistro in the Old Mill District. Thomas worked for a consulting outfit downtown and drove a Navy SUV. The message didn't have a time, but people who arrange candlelight don't do it on the fly. They book, they leave traces. I started with the obvious. Screenshots. The message was already on the lock screen. I took a photo with my phone, uploaded it to a private cloud drive, then screenshots of the conversation thread. The timestamp. Digital breadcrumbs are a hell of a thing in 2025. Texts, location tags, the little receipts of human life left behind on apps and websites. I saved everything in triplicate, cloud, external drive, a folder labeled Emma, Thomas, dated and encrypted with a passphrase only I knew. Next came the practical. The kids. If this amounted to more than a one-time lapse, I had to make sure their reality didn't crack because of my choices. That meant talking to a family friend who would babysit if necessary, checking our emergency fund, making an appointment with the pediatrician for next week's well-child visits, so nothing could be twisted into ammunition later. I don't want the story to be about me. I want my kids to feel safe. Then the financial rules. There are places where petty pride becomes dangerous. Auto payments, joint accounts, the card with her name engraved on it. All of it needed a check. I called my bank from the truck, asked about joint card protections and how to freeze a card while preserving direct deposit for daycare. They put a temporary block on any new cards requested and sent an alert to my phone for any unusual withdrawals. I didn't take the card away while she slept. I documented how many months of statements showed what. Then I pulled a compilation. Paper tells a clear story later. It's harder to reframe. Just collecting evidence felt almost clinical, but I also wanted context. Was this an affair or an old friend rekindling? Was there a financial thread or a pattern of lies stretching back months? For that, I hired someone I normally would have mocked, a private investigator, a cheap one, not forensics level, just a man with a camera who could confirm plate numbers, receipts, and whether this dinner was a single anomaly or part of a pattern. He was discreet and local. He texted me a 2-sentence bio, one photo, and an invoice I paid without thinking twice. I told him I want dates, timestamps, receipts, and a photograph of the two of them together at that restaurant. If there are any hotel stays or weekend trips, I want the bookings. If he can find a credit card trail, that's gravy. When the first report came back 3 days later, it was a small, brutal packet of facts. Multiple dinners over 2 months. Dinner receipts paid on a card that matched the name Thomas used on his reservation app. A photo from outside the bistro. Emma and Thomas walking out arm in arm. Late on a Tuesday. Nothing salacious. Just a man and a woman leaving a restaurant together. But context makes plain what a single frame can hide. The receipts filled the gaps I'd been worrying about. This wasn't a mistake. It was a rhythm. By then, my head had stopped burning and my hands were steady. I had the evidence I needed. Not for vengeance. Not yet. For clarity. For the one thing I valued above theatrics. Leverage. You can shout in the dark, but evidence is an incandescent blaze. It forces explanations, legal records, and, if needed, a courtroom to speak. I also called a friend who'd been through something similar years back. Rob, a carpenter with a shock of gray hair, and a blunt way of saying what needs to be said. Don't do anything impulsive, he told me. Do this by the book. You'll win if you're boring and legal. My version of winning wasn't headline grabbing. It was the kind of win you keep: custody clarity, financial fairness, dignity intact. Patience became the best revenge. Finally, I set the trap. Not a violent one, not a criminal one. That's drama for amateurs. But a situation that would make the truth impossible to spin. I called the bistro under the pretense of booking a table for a friend. I arranged the time for the evening Thomas and Emma usually met, a pattern the PI had confirmed. I didn't book their table. I booked the booth exactly across from it. I wanted the vantage point, the light, the place where small gestures become visible. Hand on the back of a chair, a touch on a knee. The ease lovers have that betrays the husband waiting at home. On the night, I drove my truck extra slow past the bistro, parked 2 blocks away, then walked in my work shirt and coveralls, because I wanted to see without playing a part. No rage, no scene, just a man with a camera phone and a notebook. I sat with my back to the wall and watched the door, like a conductor watching a symphony begin. When they arrived and the waiter led them toward the booth that matched the photographs, something in Emma's face hardened. For a flicker of a second, she looked at the door, as if sensing being watched. Then she smiled, like anyone who's chosen to believe the lie they'd been living. Thomas ordered wine. Emma laughed and touched his forearm. The sound cut through the restaurant like a bell. I took the photo on my phone. Not loudly, not aggressively. I hardly wanted them to notice, but the picture was clean. 2 plates half eaten, the napkin on Emma's lap, Thomas leaning in. Later, I would have timestamps, receipts, and a PE's folder. But in that moment, it felt hideously ordinary. Their bend toward each other, the familiarity that men and women rebuild with each small lie. I left before the dessert, walked back to my truck with my hands in my pockets, the phone heavy in my palm. I didn't feel righteous. I felt like an instrument that had been tuned again. The next moves would not be noise. They would be precise, and they would be public, in a way that left no room for plausible deniability. I drove home and sat at the kitchen table, with the proof spread before me like evidence in a case file. The kids were asleep. Emma was upstairs, folding laundry like nothing had shifted. I poured 2 glasses of water and set one on the table, the phone between them. Then I called her down. When she reached the bottom of the stairs and saw the folder, the phone, and the way my face was calm and measured, the first word she offered was an apology, practiced like a script. I listened until she finished. Then I pushed the photos across to her and said, I don't want a story. I want facts. This is what I have. You can explain them, or you can start packing. Tonight, I'm giving you a choice, not a threat. A choice. She opened her mouth, closed it. The silence that followed was a wait. Not loud, but inexorable. That's what happens when a ledger is laid bare. Numbers don't argue. They just are. When Chloe came home that night, she walked through the door like nothing had happened. Hair perfectly styled, lips painted red, a faint trace of perfume clinging to her coat. She kissed me on the cheek, casual, like she hadn't just lied about working late. I set my phone on the table where she could see the screen still glowing. The message thread was open. The words glared like neon. Dinner was perfect. I missed this. Her smile froze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw accusations. I simply asked, slow and steady, was dessert part of the meeting too? Or just your ex holding your hand? Her face drained of color. She stammered, It's not what it looks like. That line. That tired, recycled line. I almost laughed. Then explain it to me, I said, folding my arms. Explain why a man I haven't seen in years is telling you he misses you, while I'm at home raising our kids and keeping this house together. Her eyes flicked everywhere but my face, toward the kitchen, the floor, anywhere that wasn't my stare. Then, like flipping a switch, her tone shifted. The soft panic hardened into icy indignation. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "It was just dinner." He needed closure. "You're making this into something it isn't." Gaslighting. Classic, but I didn't bite. I leaned forward, voice calm, deliberate. "Then you won't mind if I forward these texts to my lawyer, or maybe to the kids' school board. You know, the one you volunteer at. I wonder what they'll think when they see how you spend your evenings." Her breath caught. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. Not of me, but of the quiet, calculated tone I carried. And in that silence, I knew. The game had just shifted. She thought she was holding the cards, but I'd just turned the table. When she left the kitchen that night, in a flurry of weak excuses and slammed doors, I didn't follow. I sat at the table with my phone still glowing and let the house breathe. In the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the kids watching cartoons, the answer formed itself with cold clarity. This wasn't going to be a scene. It wasn't going to be loud or messy. It would be surgical. The first rule was simple. Gather facts, not feelings. Feelings could be twisted. Facts could not. I opened the message thread again, scrolling carefully while I thought out loud. Dates, times, names. Little details that would look like nothing if presented in a rant, but would look damning if organized. I screenshot everything, then exported those screenshots to a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence, Chloe. I copied exchange timestamps, pulled up the phone contact metadata. The plan was to remove ambiguity. Not, she said, but she did. Next, I needed corroboration. A text could be faked, a one-off dinner explained away, but a pattern, months of messages, financial activity on nights she claimed to be working late, synced photos, would look very different. I pulled the shared calendar on her tablet and scanned for inconsistencies. There were open events that could be edited by either of us. That wouldn't help. Instead, I turned to small things she overlooked. Receipts. Most people forget the paper trail that comes with comfort. I had access to the household accounts and saw a dinner charge at a downtown bistro 2 weeks earlier, under a card that should have been used for groceries. I printed the statement and highlighted the line. Then the easiest thing of all, photos. Her phone had auto-upload enabled to the cloud for the family album. Seemingly private photos occasionally surfaced there because she'd left auto-sync on. I searched, thumbnails of her smile, of wine glasses, a plate of charred octopus. One image was a selfie she'd taken on the restaurant's dim patio. The timestamp matched the receipt. It wasn't much on its own, but stacked against the text, it began to look like a pattern. Rule 2, control the narrative channels. If she realized I was moving pieces around, she'd start deleting things. So I archived everything in 2 places, copies on my laptop and a secondary backup on an encrypted drive at a friend's house. I emailed the key screenshots to myself from a burner account, a paper trail outside the house. Rule 3, involve allies quietly. I didn't want drama with friends or a public mess yet. I wanted leverage and an exit plan. My lawyer friend Tom, the one who did wills and small business contracts, owed me a favor for fixing his truck last year. I sent him a short, factual message. Can you look over these? No judgment. Just legal advice on how to proceed if we need evidence for custody or separation. I attached the screenshots and the bank statement. His answer came terse. Meet Friday. Don't delete anything. Finance would be the lever. She'd been slipping into a habit of expecting me to pick up the slack. I'd been sloppy, covering more than my half, letting autopay slide without checks. That would change. I called the bank and asked for access to the joint account statements for the past 18 months, formally. I notified them I wanted any automatic debit or card use flagged to me as well. Small administrative things, but they made the household harder to weaponize. And the kids, of course the kids. I would not play games with them, but their welfare was a public stake, and some people use that like a shield. I took a photo, the same timestamped selfie from the restaurant, and put it in that secure folder. I made a note of daycare pickup schedules, of nights when the kids had been under my care while she supposedly worked late. That list was quiet and damning. The fourth rule was psychological. Never escalate in public. Never give them the theater they craved. If she wanted a big confrontation, I wouldn't deliver her performance. I would move with the patience of a metronome. She had gaslighted and expected me to fall apart. I was going to let her rage against my calm. People who rely on feints and posturing crumble when you don't play along. Over the next 2 days, I did what I promised myself I would. Methodical, boring tasks that would become evidence later. I set up a secure folder with a timestamped README, listing where each piece came from. I collected the bank copy, the receipt scanned, the photo, the message thread, and the calendar inconsistencies. I scheduled a quick meeting with Tom for Friday morning and asked him, in practical terms, if this goes to divorce, what do I need to protect? The house, the kids, my income. And how do I keep this quiet until I choose to reveal it? He nodded, looked through what I had, and said one line that felt like a verdict. You did the right thing saving this. Nobody will believe emotion-backed accusations when facts can be presented in court. But you have to be clean. Don't touch her things. Don't snoop further than this. We use what you legally have. There was another piece to the plan I didn't tell Tom about immediately. The X. Men who tempt married women tend to leave traces. A bookmarked article. A tagged photo. Friends who'd chimed in on his Instagram 2 years ago. I built a small clinical dossier on the man. Not to stalk, not to humiliate, but to tie his presence to the pattern. He had a public profile, and his own online life would be the easiest to examine without breaking any rules. By Saturday night, the folder was thick enough to feel heavy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like an accountant of pain. Converting betrayal into a ledger, that cold arithmetic is terrifying until it becomes freeing. I realized the next phase would be about timing. Revealed too early and she'd vanish the traces. Wait too long and she'd have time to build a defense. I needed a moment when the evidence would do maximum damage and her options would be minimal. I booked the kids' soccer practices, scheduled a dentist appointment, and made myself scarce for an afternoon. When Chloe asked if dinner could wait because she was running errands, I said okay, and left the house with a calm I'd rehearsed. As I closed the front door, the file folder sat on the table like a loaded briefcase. I wasn't out for blood. I was out for a reckoning. And I intended to make it clear, methodically, that not every betrayal dissolves into dramatic scenes. Some betrayals are dealt with quietly, in paperwork, timelines, and the patient presentation of the truth. When I drove away, the plan was set. Gather, secure, consult, and strike at a moment that would force the truth into the light where it could not be rewritten. The next move belonged to someone else, and I planned, with a careful smile, for her to have to explain everything to people who did not know how to forgive easy lies. By the following week, the cracks began to show in her perfect facade. She thought she was still in control. She believed she could spin late nights and vague explanations into a believable narrative. But lies are brittle things. They crumble when pressure is applied in the right places. The first domino fell at the dinner table. I casually asked about her work project that supposedly kept her at the office late. She launched into a rehearsed answer, all buzzwords and fake exhaustion. I let her finish, nodded, and then asked the kind of question only someone who already knew the truth would dare. So, Chloe, does your boss usually order the same Cabernet your ex likes? Or was that just a special occasion? Her fork froze midair. The color drained from her face. She tried to recover with a laugh, but the sound was hollow, jagged. The kids kept eating, oblivious, while she muttered something about team dinners and networking opportunities. I didn't argue. I just gave her the same polite smile I'd practiced in the mirror. Calm, silent, devastating. That silence worked better than any shouting match. She wanted noise. She wanted me to break so she could cast me as paranoid, controlling, unstable. Instead, I gave her nothing but still water. And in still water, every ripple of her guilt showed. The second domino toppled when I stopped subsidizing her alibi. Before, I'd always transferred extra money into the joint account, covering bills she claimed she was too busy to handle. This time, I didn't. The utility notices came in her name. The daycare sent reminders addressed to her. She panicked, Asking why payments were late, I shrugged. I figured you'd handled it. Since you've been working so many late nights, you must be making more than I realized. Her lips tightened. She scrambled, but the scramble was obvious, and obvious cracks spread fast. The third domino came through people, not paperwork. Word spreads in small circles. A coworker of hers, one who'd always liked me, let slip that she hadn't been at the office on 2 of the nights she'd claimed. I didn't even press, just tucked that away. Another weight on the growing pile. Her excuses began to fray. She grew more defensive, more irritable. Every neutral question I asked, "How was your meeting? Did you enjoy dinner?" landed like a hammer blow. Because she heard the unspoken, "I know." I never raised my voice. I never confronted directly again. Instead, I let the weight of her own deception crush her from the inside. She'd walk through the door smiling, and I'd hand her a glass of wine without a word. She'd scroll her phone nervously at night, and I'd simply glance at the clock, as if noting the time for my records. The most brutal part? She didn't know how much I knew. She had no idea where the line was. What I had in my file, what was just suspicion, what was ironclad proof, and uncertainty is the cruelest kind of punishment. It eats at you. It makes you second-guess every move, every excuse, every sentence you speak. By Friday, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, dark circles, shaky hands, snapping at the kids for minor things. She was unraveling, thread by thread, and all I'd done was sit calmly, quietly, letting her lies destroy her from within. The dominoes were falling, and when they were all on the ground, when her tower of excuses lay in ruins, that's when I would place the final piece, the truth she couldn't spin, couldn't laugh away, couldn't talk her way out of. It happened on a Sunday evening. The house was quiet. The kids were asleep upstairs, cartoons still flickering faintly from the tablet they'd forgotten to turn off. I sat at the kitchen table with a single folder in front of me. Inside, screenshots, receipts, and the truth she thought would stay hidden. She walked in late again. Hair too neat for a busy day at work. Lipstick too fresh for someone who claimed to be buried in spreadsheets. She tried to smile, but it was brittle, glass-like, the kind of smile that cracks under pressure. "Long day?" I asked, voice calm, almost casual. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, meetings ran over." I slid the folder across the table without a word. The sound of it scraping against the wood seemed to echo through the kitchen. She froze, her hands hovering in the air, then slowly reaching for it like it might bite. The first page was a screenshot of the text. Dinner was perfect. I missed this. The second? A receipt from the very restaurant she swore she'd never been to. The third? A time-stamped photo a coworker had sent me. Her and her ex leaving the same restaurant, hand in hand. Her face drained of color. She didn't speak, didn't breathe, just stared. Finally, I leaned forward, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut. "You sat in front of me, Chloe, and told me it was just work. You lied while holding my children's hands, while spending my money, while living in my house, and all the while, you thought I was too blind to see." Her lips trembled. It's not what it looks like." I let out a low laugh, cold, humorless. "Then explain. Explain the text. The dinner, the receipts, the photo. Tell me, Chloe. What exactly am I misunderstanding here?" She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Nothing came. Her throat worked, but no words formed. That silence. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. The power shifted. She knew it. I knew it. I sat back, folded my arms, and delivered the line that ended the game. "You said you wanted honesty? Fine. Here's mine. From this moment on, you're not my wife. You're just the woman who lied her way out of a family, and tomorrow morning, my lawyer will make it official." Her eyes filled, not with guilt, but with panic. She'd expected anger, shouting, maybe even forgiveness after tears. What she hadn't expected was my cold certainty. For the first time since this began, she had no move left to play. No excuse, no manipulation, just silence. And I let that silence sit between us. heavy and final, until she broke down in tears while I walked away. The next morning, I followed through. My lawyer had the folder in his hands by 9 a.m. Every screenshot, every receipt, every timestamp laid out in perfect order. He didn't even need to say much. Infidelity plus deception in the middle of divorce proceedings was already enough to tilt the scale. By the end of that week, Chloe's leverage was gone. The house and kids she had arrogantly claimed in our first conversation, the judge saw through her. She was granted visitation, but custody went joint, and primary residence remained with me. The house stayed mine, protected not just by law, but by the undeniable evidence of her betrayal. Her ex, he ghosted her the moment things turned ugly. Whatever flame they thought they were reigniting burned out fast when reality, lawyers, custody battles, finances, showed up. The man who sent her dinner was perfect, disappeared before the ink on her affidavit was even dry. She tried to spin it, tried to play the victim, but the evidence spoke louder than her words, louder than her tears. Every time she sat across from me in mediation, her silence was the loudest thing in the room. As for me, when it was all done, I took my kids to the park. We got ice cream. They laughed, ran around, argued over swings, and I realized something. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd betrayed them. And no matter how many dinners she had with her ex, no matter how many lies she whispered into the dark, she could never take away the fact that I was the one still standing there with them. The papers came through a month later. Divorce finalized, custody secured, the house safe. My lawyer handed me the stamped decree with a small nod. I looked at it for a long time, not with joy, not with sadness, just clarity. People think betrayal ends with screaming matches or slamming doors, but in my case, it ended with silence. Hers, not mine. And in that silence, I found something she thought I'd lost: freedom.